Hi, folks. It's Mary Rowe from the Canadian Urban Institute. Really pleased to be with the Economic Developers Council of Ontario and all of you to talk about my main street. Chris and I just finished presenting actually at the other end of the country. I've just been saying it's a Jetsons moment. I'm in Vancouver today. Believe it or not, you can actually see the mountains with snow. I'm told that's unusual. Lucky me. And Chris and I just presented to the federal government out here to talk about what we're trying to learn about my main street recovery from all of you. And hoping that they will also look at creating a kind of my main street platform for communities across the West. The focus of this program, as you know, is Southern Ontario. We're really pleased to have you be part of it with us as we learn and teach each other and learn a lot about what it's going to take to actually bring our main streets back and build their capacity to be even more vibrant, more inclusive, more economically productive and culturally lively, to remind us why we choose to live where we live and what it's like to actually be with our neighbors again. As I said, I'm in Vancouver, which is the land of the Coast Salish peoples, the Squamish, the Tsleil-Waututh, and the Musqueam. And we are very conscious that we are settlers on different territories across this country and in Southern Ontario as well, different kinds of ancestral relationships and territorial relationships. This program is all about the street and the value of the street as a site of reconciliation, that streets actually bring us together with each other. We had a session last week on placemaking. We had someone from New Orleans who reminded us that the streets in New Orleans are called the neutral ground. And that's why my main street's so important. Main streets have been hit hard by COVID and by the various measures that governments had to take to protect us from COVID. And now we're in a place where we can rebuild them and re-enliven them and invest in them differently. And we're appreciative to have the support of the federal government and other partners to work with us, EDCO and us, on a kind of 1-2 kind of approach to animating businesses and providing supports to businesses, and also doing placemaking and how we animate together and make these the powerful combination that you get when you mix people and place in a street. So if you're not familiar with the platform, as you can see, we're translating en deux langues. So please go to the bottom of the screen and choose the language that you would like to hear this session presented to you in. We tape them. Go down there, click English, click French, and magically you will hear the voice of the person speaking the language that you're most comfortable hearing it in. Similarly, we close caption, which you can take off if you prefer, if you get tired of reading it, or if it would help you to assist you to be able to participate, please put closed captioning on. We have an active chat. I've got to say that the CUI EDCO community are big chatters, really great. So put some questions in the chat. I can already see people stepping in and telling us where they're coming in from. It's really important for us to realize we're all in it together, folks. We're all struggling with a lot of similar challenges. And so the more that we can learn from one another, share best practices, tell each other what we've tried and what we want to try, the stronger we'll be and the more powerful a recovery we will build from the ground up. So remember that this is we can see, you can see us, but we can't see you. So the chat is the way for you to express to us what's going on. So I'm going to pass it over to Chris and wish you a great session, and just tell you, get your applications in, start dreaming some really good collaborations and some smart ideas on how we're going to actually strengthen and revive and recommit ourselves to our main streets. Thanks for joining us and have a great session.
Thank you, Mary. Always a great introduction and welcome, and always hard to follow. But thank you for everyone for logging in today. We've got a great big crowd, and great to see the geographic representation of folks across Ontario, some of which we've talked to before, and many of you which were talking for the first time today. My name is Chris Rickett. I've been helped create and continue to advise the team on the creation of My Main Street and the delivery of it. Happy to be here today with my colleagues from CUI and the My Main Street team from EDCO. So we're going to walk through a little bit more detail on the program itself, and then open up questions, all with the idea of figuring out how we can best support all of you and taking advantage of My Main Street and the programs that we've developed to support communities across Southern Ontario. As Mary alluded to, My Main Street is really around focused on helping support the revitalization of main streets across Southern Ontario, really with a lens, of course, of bringing people back to main streets, but also really looking at how we support local communities and local economic development and create local economic opportunities for residents. We have a goal to work with over 200 communities, main streets across the province over the next 2.5 years. And of course, look at how we support job creation and existing jobs along Main Street. When we're looking at my Main Street from an objective perspective, where of course the big picture is as a response to COVID, how do we revitalize and rebuild our main streets and support small businesses as a response from the pandemic? But we're wanting to really take a data-driven approach. So really understanding those local trade areas and those local main streets and understanding where the challenges are and where the opportunities are, so that we can ultimately invest in those things that are going to be sustainable and have impact over the long term in those communities. And then, of course, really leveraging placemaking to bring people back to main streets, all with the goal, of course, strengthening over 200 main streets across Southern Ontario. All of this is being funded, thankfully, as a result of a $23 million investment from our friends at FedDev Southern Ontario. And we have funding to support this over the next 2.5 years. So when we look at the program itself, and there's actually two streams, one delivered by EGCO and another one delivered by the Canadian Urban Institute. The local business accelerator side is really focused around community economic development, supporting the starting and growing of local businesses, with three kind of key program components. One around Main Street ambassadors, which are really putting boots on the ground as business advisors to support businesses and help start new businesses on those identified main streets. Also flowing funding through to local businesses to either help them get started or help them grow, as well as providing deep data market research and analytics to really understand that local main streets demographics and market potential, and understanding where those investments would make the most sense. And then the other stream is the community activator side, and this is being delivered by CUI. And this is really all about animating main streets through placemaking and activations. So really, how do we bring people back to experience their main streets and rebuild those connections with those main streets? And so with this, it's really placemaking project support. And what we're talking about here is non-repayable funding contributions towards placemaking projects, which could be anything from local events to light infrastructure investments to placemaking strategies. And of course, providing other activation and toolkits to ultimately support. So different ideas and things that have been done in other communities. Really, these streams are really focused on, at the end of the day, is when you look at the local business accelerator, it's about making sure how do we build a healthy retail mix along a main street, which of course is going to encourage people to stay and shop and experience those main streets. And then the community activator side is how do we bring people back to those main streets and see the opportunities, and that they can ultimately, come back and shop and take advantage of that retail mix. So this is kind of the 1-2 punch. And then of course, leveraging other programs out there like Digital Main Street and others that ultimately support Main Street businesses and provide a well-rounded ecosystem of supports. With that, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Jared Kolb, who heads up the Community Activator stream of the program, and he'll talk a little bit about that stream.
Awesome.
Jared?
Thanks very much, Chris. As Chris mentioned, my name is Jared Kolb. I'm the program director with the My Main Street Community Activator program at CUI, and thrilled to have so many folks digitally with us today. Of course, as Chris mentioned, we're a program focused on investing more than $8 million over 2 years in local community placemaking activities across Southern Ontario. Chris mentioned a few of these types, and we'll dig in a little bit more. Before we kind of move forward, though, with those examples, I think it's really important for each of us to think through, what is placemaking? And, for some, on the call today, this will be a term you're very familiar with. For others, this will be brand new. And I'd like to invite everyone to really think and visualize, their favorite public spaces. What is it about those spaces that really attracts you to visiting, to spending time, to spending money? Often we think about, of course, the events that are happening, whether it's a live music, outdoor classes or other types of events. And these are the active amenities that help to define these spaces that are our favorite spaces. Of course, on the other side, though, of course, they're very passive amenities that also form the backbone to our favorite public spaces. And these often it's our active amenities that get all the fanfare, but it's the passive stuff. It's the seating, it's the public art, it's the trees, the landscaping, and so on, that really again help us not only to visit but to linger and spend time in those spaces. And so I think when we think about our favorite spaces, try and bring that lens to a lot of the underserved places that are have been adversely impacted due to COVID-19, and think about the kinds of things that we can do together and collectively to have an impact. Ultimately, we want to strengthen the connection between people and places, and we want to encourage people to visit, to spend, and to stay. Next slide, Chris. There are a variety of types of projects that we're going to be talking about that are fundable, through the Community Activator, and they're listed there. We're going to jump right in. We'll go to the next slide. The first is our events and activations. These are short, limited, or reoccurring community events or activations that are aimed at attracting an audience and responding to an underserved market demand or enhancing community connection. Now, we have developed a long list of potential projects under each of the three buckets that we're going to talk about right now. It's available at mymainstreet.ca/news. We'll link that over in the chat as well. I'm gonna cover a couple of examples, but there's tons and tons. And I would really encourage you to not limit yourselves to these, but to really think creatively about how to bring people back to Main Street. There's a couple of examples here. You could organize a market day for specific local businesses to expand their storefronts onto streets and sidewalks. You can create outdoor performances with local artists. You could do a visioning block party. You could host a holiday or other type of market that features local makers. Next slide. The second bucket, of fundable projects falls within our community improvements. These are above grade enhancements to a streetscape design or landscaping and amenities that support the transformation of a specific geographic area. And, I want to make clear here, capital costs, including new buildings or land, et cetera, are not eligible. But we're really talking about the above ground enhancements. So, this could be you could design and build a series of pop-up parkettes on vacant properties, install comfort stations for vulnerable populations, or design and implement a laneway transformation project. So there's a number of things that could happen here. Of course, often folks, we're all thinking about, how can we enhance the streetscape through patios and other seating on our main streets, but we can go well beyond that as well.
Hey, Jared.
Yeah, we've got policy and capacity building. Thanks, Chris. I want to highlight this as our third and final bucket. Included here are really kind of the longer term types of projects, policies that you want to get into place to assist with your placemaking activities. So this could be a sustainable placemaking strategy for a specific geographic area. You could develop a framework for ongoing public space activation and engagement. Or develop a plan for wintertime placemaking. This is one of my favorite ones, this last one. And like I'm sure many of us on the call, some of us are really looking forward to winter, others of us are dreading it. With that being said, there's all kinds of things we can do with our public spaces to really enhance what it means to be outside in the winter. Now, the question is, how will the funding work? The Community Activator is administered by the Canadian Urban Institute, and projects will be eligible for contributions between $25,000 and $250,000. You could apply for a project that is complete, underway, or planned, but support will be offered in the form of reimbursement against incurred costs. Applications will be assessed through an open and competitive application process, and taking into account regional representation and in-year available funding amounts. The application process. We all find ourselves in the midst of applications currently. Our applications for year one opened on October the 1st, and they're open until November the 1st. The projects that are eligible for reimbursement, these are against costs that are incurred between June 8th and December 31st, 2021. Oh, June, such fond memories of June. Yeah, June 8th and December 31st. Approximately 70% of our available funding, I really want to underscore this point, but about 70% of our available funding will be distributed in year one as a part of efforts to quickly and efficiently provide support to local communities struggling with the ongoing realities of COVID-19. There will be, a year two as well. Applications for year two will open December the 1st. Eligible reimbursements, these will be against costs incurred between January 1 and December 31st, 2022. And approximately 30% of available funding will be distributed in year two. Who can apply? Vital question. So representatives from the following groups: a municipality or local or regional government, a business improvement area, Indigenous governing body or development corporation, federally or provincially incorporated nonprofit, or other community organizations that apply with another organization. Projects must have all the necessary licenses and permits, satisfying the requirements of all regulating bodies in their local jurisdiction. And want to underscore that about 25% of available project funding are reserved for communities with a population of under 100,000 people. How does the assessment work? We want to, of course, we've had this question come in a few times, which is, can my municipality or jurisdiction apply for, multiple projects? The answer to that is yes, but individual applications must focus on a specific geographic area. So my hometown is Kitchener originally. So, if the city of Kitchener were applying, we, wouldn't want to see a wayfinding project for all of the city of Kitchener, but we'd want to see, zeroed in on, one main street or geographic area. Projects will be assessed against vision, impact, and need, and really must be able to demonstrate a few things. We want to see a clear articulation of why this area would benefit from a placemaking project, and any benefits that it would hold for equity-seeking groups. A plan for how you're going to be able to tell if your project has had an impact. So that could be in terms of attendance or economic uplift, social cohesion, or a sense of belonging. And we're going to want to see a strong project plan and a clear costed budget. And that project costs, we of course want to see that the project costs are going to be incurred along the program time frame. Thank you to everybody who has been submitting questions to placemaking at mymainstreet.ca. We'll list that. I list that email address again at the end of this presentation. But so far, we've had a few applications and there's been lots of questions. It's awesome to see. I'm going to just go through a couple FAQs here that we've seen a few times. So first, if we submit more than one application, will they be judged on their own merits? Yes. So each application will be judged on its own merits according to our scoring matrix. It's really just difficult to estimate, though, what the demand will be. But as I mentioned previously, regional equity is an important component of the program, meaning that we'll be distributing successful recipients across Southern Ontario. Another question in the applicant information, one of the six suggested activities is creating a patio or public spaces for local cafes and restaurants. But under eligible expenses, capital is not an eligible expense. So in other words, what's in, what's out? It's a great question. The answer is all above ground costs associated with placemaking activations are eligible expenses. So barricade seating, tables for, say, a temporary patio would be considered eligible. Next slide. For the eligibility dates, are you looking at the invoice date or the date of the project? We'd be looking at invoice date. Again, that's June 8th to December 31st, 2021. If our event happens in 2022, but we have expenses in 2021, can we apply for the first intake? Yes, but again, only expenses incurred in 2021 would be eligible for reimbursement. You would need to apply again in the second intake for reimbursements against expenses incurred in 2022. Next slide. our event started before the eligibility period or is already concluded? Is our project eligible? Yep, you bet. Though we're only able to reimburse costs that were booked between June 8th and December 31st, 2021. And then finally, when will you notify round one applicants on whether or not they were successful? We expect to notify applicants on the status of their application in late November. Thanks. Yeah, and a couple resources here, the website, mymainstreet.ca/placemaking. And again, questions about eligibility or anything else related to the project, please get in touch with our team at placemaking@mymainstreet.ca. And I know I've been seeing a lot of questions coming into the chat, so there'll be time to go through that as well as they're being answered. But I'm going to pass this back to Chris to discuss the next section.
Hey, thanks, Jared. And so, yeah, I'll walk through the local business accelerator side and get to the details specifically on that program. The program itself really works out into kind of three key stages here. One is we really start the idea, of course, of the accelerator program is that we're going to focus in on 65 Main Street communities across Southern Ontario. But before we start any work in any of those communities, we'll do a deep dive into that Main Street community and its trade area to really understand its demographics, where the market opportunities are, what's the consumer spend, what does mobility look like, where do people spend their time on media. We'll do some primary research and survey residents to understand what they think is missing on their main street to help identify new market opportunities. And that research will help form the basis of ultimately of where the opportunities are to grow that main street from a business perspective and address kind of the retail mix and the health of it, as well as understand where there's opportunity for growth from a customer acquisition perspective. With that data in hand, the Main Street Ambassador will really focus on entrepreneur engagement and support. So on one stream, where there's market opportunities and new opportunities for new businesses, that ambassador will do outreach to the local community to try to identify residents or entrepreneurs who may want to start businesses to address those gaps. Then they'll support them through that process and connecting them into other resources that might be in the community, whether that be through the local CFDC or the Small Business Enterprise Center, or other programs like Digital Main Street or Futurepreneur. Really, that ambassador will provide wraparound support to make sure that that business gets connected into all of the available resources depending on what their needs are. Likewise, they'll also work with existing businesses. And so again, similarly providing that wraparound support and providing help and assistance around looking at where their growth opportunities might be. And then in addition to that engagement and support, there'll also be funding support. And so those locally owned Main Street businesses will be eligible for $10,000 non-repayable contributions to either support the starting of their business or the growing of their business. When we look at the program, the local business accelerator itself, at the heart of it is the Main Street Ambassador. And again, this Main Street Ambassador is providing that hands-on wraparound business advisory support. In many regards, this is very much like the Small Business Enterprise Center business consultants or the CFDC business consultants that many of you know in your communities. This is really that same skill set, and we really just see this as an additional resource that's available, but focused on a very specific geographic area. And when we look at the availability of Main Street ambassadors, depending on the size of your community, you could actually take advantage of multiple Main Street ambassadors to focus on multiple community Main Street neighborhoods in your community as well. And so ultimately what happens with the local business accelerator is that local municipality, a small business enterprise center, a BIA, Chamber of Commerce, any other kind of local not-for-profit that's focused on community economic development will apply to EDCO in order to unlock all of these various resources that are associated with the local business accelerator. So that includes the Main Street Ambassador, which will provide a contribution of $50,000 towards towards their staffing. We'll provide the deep market research that will help guide the activities available to guide the investments in that community. We'll also provide $10,000 grants that'll be available for businesses within that identified area. We'll also do local market research for businesses within that community. And we'll also provide some programming dollars to help with local marketing and program delivery. And ultimately, we'll be focusing on 65 Main Street neighborhoods across the province. So ultimately, part of this will aim to build a network of other Main Street that Main Street Ambassador network will share best practices and share with each other. So when we kind of look at what is a Main Street and where to focus, where these ambassadors could ultimately focus, there's a number of scenarios. Of course, business improvement areas are one that just popped to mind. There's an existing structure and support for businesses within that BIA. So you could put an ambassador in a BIA. Some communities are looking at leveraging a business ambassador to target new commercial areas where they might have an interest in starting a BIA in the future. But you could also look at other commercial areas or strip malls or commercial strips, as long as they are meeting places within the community and have independent local businesses within them. Another consideration are future downtowns or redevelopment areas. So maybe commercial areas that are undergoing transformation due to transit investments or planning policies. And also looking at rural downtowns, focused on several, we could look at how you focus on several smaller downtowns in a county as an example. So we're very flexible and we'll work with you to kind of figure out what your local goals are from an economic development perspective. But ultimately, we want to focus in on areas where we can have impact and make sure we're putting a lot of resources into those defined areas. From an eligibility perspective, your project must occur within Southern Ontario, except the City of Toronto. From an applicant perspective, could be a municipality, local or regional government, of course, could be a BIA, could be a community-based registered not-for-profit, so a Chamber of Commerce, an SBEC. Any of these, any funding applications that aren't submitted by the municipality, we will want to see a letter of support from the municipality, though, just to know that they're aligned and supportive of the application. We don't need council resolutions or anything like that. It can be a simple letter from the ECDEV department, as an example. Some other considerations with those applications is we will want to see some additional funding resources towards the project. So we're really looking at at least a minimum of 25% towards the project costs. When I say 25%, it's in relation to the dollars that are allocated for the ambassador, and that can be in kind or cash contributions. So it could be a salary top up as a cash contribution. And it could also be the in-kind staff time to support that ambassador. And the key piece here is ultimately the funding has to be for a defined geographic area. So whether that's a commercial Main Street, a central business district, but it can't be used to support programming across a municipal jurisdiction. And again, we are reserving 25% of that funding for communities with a population that are under 50,000. Some additional things to kind of think about in your applications is that we'll also want to see how the local small business enterprise center or the Community Futures Development Corporation is involved, specifically how you can leverage their local support programming. Again, we're not looking to recreate the resources that are already out there. There's great resources in the SBEC and CFTC networks. And ultimately, we see the ambassador in many regards as an extension of those resources. So applications that bring in those resources and align with those local economic development partners is key. And in addition, if there's a BIA or there's service clubs or others that are ultimately involved in that specific geographic area, highlight those as well. And then a key piece here, of course, is looking at this from an equity deserving perspective as well. So, of course, we want to look at demographics in those communities around equity deserving populations. But you can also start to look at this as well as how do you increase the diversity of the business community along your main street? So for instance, maybe using your grants to increase representation of women or BIPOC or LGBTQ and disabled community members in that business community. So those are some things to kind of think about from an application perspective, and of course, we will want to see if that main street and that community was struggling pre-COVID. That will be a lens that we will put to this. I think we all have to recognize as well that we probably haven't seen the full impact of COVID, and ultimately, I think we all can agree that there's probably a lot of zombie businesses out there, and as we start to see supports waning down, we'll probably see some more distressed businesses in areas as well. So talk about that in your applications and highlight some of the local challenges or things that you see coming up as well. So from a timeline perspective, again, the applications opened last on October 1st. They'll remain open until we've kind of identified those 65 neighborhoods. There's, of course, has been a lot of interest in the program itself. Our goal is to, as those applications come in, is to review them within 2 weeks. If they're denied, we will work with those applicants to identify areas to focus on and resubmit. And then once they're approved, we'll sign an agreement, and we'd like to have some ambassadors on the ground by winter. But of course, we recognize that many will probably have to focus in on kind of January, February timeline as well. But we'll work with you depending on what your timelines and requirements are locally. So just a few FAQs that we have seen that have come through. Can a Main Street community apply for both the Accelerator and the Activator program? The answer here is yes. We encourage Main Streets to apply for both the placemaking and the local business accelerator. Again, the local business accelerator is about rebuilding and establishing a healthy retail mix, whereas the community activator is about bringing people back to that Main Street. Once they get there, they'll see that healthy retail mix and continue to leverage that shopping opportunity and that meeting opportunity. Does the ambassador work on initiatives that support the full Main Street or just those 10 successful businesses? So the Main Street ambassador is there to work with the entire designated Main Street neighborhood, just not 10 businesses that receive those contributions. So in addition to those 10 contributions, we can do market research for more than those 10 businesses and do those reports. But again, sometimes businesses are just looking for help around certain other things. And remember that part of the ambassador's job is really to provide wraparound support. So referring them to other programs that are available in the ecosystem to support small businesses. So whether that be, to the CFDC to look for a loan, or Futurepreneur for additional financing, or help from Digital Main Street around some digital transformation. That ambassador is really going to be plugging these businesses into a range of other programs and supports depending on what their needs are at the end of the day. Can we focus the grants on increasing the representation of women, BIPOC, Indigenous youth, and LGBTQ entrepreneurs? And yes, focusing grants on increasing the diversity of entrepreneurs is accepted and encouraged. And then how do Main Street ambassadors identify the 10 businesses to receive the non-repayable contributions? So, that local ambassador, EDCO will manage all the administration of paying out those contributions and will handle the application process. The local ambassador will play a key role in identifying and awarding those contributions as well. So each Main Street ambassador will have 10 of those grants to work with in their Main Street. The goal, of course, is to have 5 go to new businesses and 5 go to existing businesses. That said, if we find through the market research that target for new businesses can't be reached, those remaining contributions could be allocated to existing businesses. So you've got 10 grants regardless for that area. If, for instance, a business only needs a $5,000 grant, that means you could repurpose the other $5,000 for an 11th grant if you wanted as well. But ultimately, the ambassador will build the relationship with those local businesses, help them with their applications, and then work with EDCO to ultimately approve those applications. There will be an application process. It'll be detailed. It'll be transparent. And ultimately, all those details will be available for those businesses when those applications go live. But the ambassador is the key delivery partner there. When it comes to who pays for the market research that businesses must complete to receive the allocation, My Main Street will pay for that. So we're working with a specific vendor to carry out the research that'll be customized for that business. But in order for a business to be eligible for that non-repayable contribution, they'll need to complete that market research report provided by My Main Street. And so we'll do that work for them. We'll share and then the Main Street ambassador will take that back to the business and help them interpret it and understand it and think about where they might want to invest that $10,000 to realize ultimately the opportunity that has been identified through that market research report. But from where those dollars could be spent, they could be spent on leasehold improvements. It could be marketing and inventory. It could be technology upgrades. It could be a range of things. But of course, the foundational piece is doing that market research report so that we understand the economic opportunity and growth opportunities for that business. There's of course more FAQs that you can find at mymainstreet.ca. And as far as application instructions, you can head to the website, mymainstreet.ca Accelerator program. And the application guide is there, as well as detailed materials. You fill out the form and submit that online form and upload that document. And then it comes into us, and ultimately we'll review that and get back to you. With that, if you have any further questions around the Accelerator program, you can reach out to Amy Matchin. Her email is there. And of course, after this presentation, we'll share the deck with everyone so you have all these details. With that, though, I think there's lots of questions in the chat, and I think we'll dig in and answer your questions and figure out how we can best help all of you.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks, Jared. That was an awesome presentation. So we'd like to invite all the folks that are here as attendees to ask questions. And if you haven't already, if you have, we're just going to go through those questions. If we don't get to your question, we are going to be posting this recording and sort of an extended FAQ section on our website. So all of your questions will get answered. We're committed to that. So just be patient with us as we work through these questions, and we will get there. So the first question that I'd like to ask you guys, Chris and Jared, is what is the definition of a main street? So I think that was kind of a little bit answered, but maybe if we could just make it very clear.
Yeah, no problem. I think we take a very broad view of what a main street could be. So, we have your traditional main streets that people may think of those 3-story buildings and apartments above and retail at grade. So of course, there's that traditional view, but these could also be commercial centers in suburbs as well. They could be strip malls. They could be new downtowns that are being developed in some of the centers in the GTA. We're also thinking of, rural downtowns. And so if you're, in a county, maybe we focus on a few of those small downtowns throughout the county. We're really looking for you to, identify what your downtowns are and identify that geographic area where you would ultimately want to invest, these resources. But we'll be creative with you and also looking at First Nations communities. What does that downtown look like, or what does that meeting place look like on reserve? So we're open and we'll work with you to be as creative and to really focus in on what your local needs might be.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris, for answering that question. Jared, we have a question on the activator side. So do they have to be net new ideas? So for example, reinventing a market or event that existed before 2020?
An interesting question. I think what we would really want to see, in an application about an existing event is specifically how this is responding, to the challenges brought forth by COVID-19, about how, the event is especially important, for equity-seeking groups. And obviously would want to ensure that any the timeline fits, of course, as I emphasized. So those would be important things that we'd want to see.
Great, thank you. Chris, next question. So this community is asking, they have a pre-COVID trade area analysis. Would an almost sort of post-COVID trade area analysis to see the impact of the pandemic qualify?
Yeah, I think, we'll work with the community. We have a bit of a template that we'll be using for that market research. The good thing about our partner in this is that we can look at this in time as well. So we can look pre-COVID, during COVID, post-COVID, now. And I suspect in some communities we'll look post-project as well and during the project. So, any details you currently have is great. And what we'll do is we'll build upon it and bring more data and insight to it.
Great, thank you so much. And just to sort of help clarify a couple of questions in the chat, could you just, one of you just let everybody know sort of the eligibility area for this program and where they can find that on our website?
Yeah, we'll send a link out to everyone after this, but it's basically, when we say Southern Ontario in FedDev terms, it's kind of like Ottawa down to the south of of Algonquin Park, across to south of Parry Sound, down to Windsor, and of course across to Niagara. So it's a big area, but within that, minus the City of Toronto. So there's no funding specifically for the City of Toronto. They got their own funding contribution. But so all of that area, and we'll share the map with everyone.
Yeah, so the eligible municipalities just got shared in the chat. So if you're wondering specifically about your area of eligibility, just quickly take a look on that map there that was just posted in the chat. Thanks, Jared, for answering that question quickly. Just another sort of general question for both sides. Will applications be reviewed and approved as they roll in, or will you be waiting until the application deadline to review them? More of a question for the activator side, but relevant to both.
Yeah, it's a great question. We will be waiting until applications are closed on November the 1st to evaluate applications.
Yeah, and then on the Accelerator side, it's the opposite. We'll be reviewing them as they come in.
Not confusing at all.
So for the activator side, so any placemaking contributions that you're looking for, they won't review until the application window closes at the end of October. But as far as if you're going to take advantage of the Accelerator program and that Main Street Ambassador, get your application in, because we'll be reviewing them on as they come in.
Great, thank you so much. And Chris, just another question. Can funds be used towards, and maybe this is for both, can funds be used towards office rent? So I think this question is sort of going towards the $10,000 funding for businesses on the Accelerator side, and maybe an activator question as well.
Yeah, so from an Accelerator side, we'll be looking for those dollars to be spent towards things that are going to grow the business, right? So that is going to be marketing, that is going to be inventory, that may be increasing investments in digital tools. It could be inventions and leasehold improvements, but generally we wouldn't see it as something that would be specifically for rent. It's really looking at how we grow your business at the end of the day. Which hopefully then means you can pay your rent.
Yeah, I would say that in general, from the activator side, rent, we need to look at that pretty closely. I would say that if this is like for an ongoing cost, that an individual business is applying for, I'd probably say no. With that being said, if this was to take out, an event space for a specific amount of time, that is open to all, I think that's an interesting question and could be eligible.
Yeah, and I think building on what Jared said around the activator and placemaking side, like some of the things from those long lists of opportunities, there are things like maybe you're going to do a pop-up shop in your downtown. And so maybe the activator dollars that's a new cost for rent to support a pop-up shop. Or you might want to do a bit of a Main Street recovery center in your main street. And then those activator dollars could be potentially activated for the rent of that. But new costs, yes, looking at the project, depending on what the project is, but just ongoing things that you were doing kind of prior or your regular business, that would not be something that would be eligible on the activator side.
Thank you so much for answering those questions. And Jared, we have another one from Activator. Is the reimbursement for 100% of the project, or is it a matching grant?
It's not matching. It could be for 100%. We certainly encourage folks to, develop and, source other funding as needed. But no, it's not a matching program.
Great, thank you. And just sort of another question, will new projects be judged more favorably than completed projects?
No, not new over completed. Again, as we said, these will be funding, planned, completed, or projects that are underway, and where expenses, are happening in that period of June 8th to December 31st. Of course, that is for year one. Year two, it falls, of course, between January 1st and December 31st, 2022. And same thing, we'll be looking at expenses that are associated with projects planned or completed or underway for that period.
Kelsey, I'm just noticing there's still more questions about what Southern Ontario is. So lots of questions around Eastern Ontario. I get it. Southern Ontario and FedDev is super confusing. But Ottawa and east of Ottawa, Smith Falls, Prescott, Wilson, Russell rather, those all qualify as FedDev's area. So the map link is in the chat, but it's also on our website for eligible municipalities. So it's all there. And yes, Eastern Ontario is referred to as Southern Ontario by FedDev.
Thank you so much, Chris, for clarifying that. And yes, if there's any, specific, if you're not on the map, you don't see yourself, you have any sort of questions about that, please do reach out to us. There is contact information on our website, and we're happy to address your questions directly. We have just under 15 minutes left, so we're going to do our best to answer as many questions as we can. Rest assured, we will take down all of your questions and get those answered on our website in the FAQ section. So just stay up to date on our website, and we will update with the answers to all of the questions.
Kelsey, can we, I think we can export the questions so we could individually follow up with these folks as well, just for their questions.
Yeah, we can do both. Absolutely. Just for sure, relevant questions to the group, we'll bring to that FAQ page as well. Absolutely. So Chris, another question about Accelerator. Will My Main Street be offering training for the ambassadors?
Yeah, so as far as onboarding your Main Street ambassador, we will provide a job description to help you from the hiring perspective, and then there will be training to support that ambassador. We have already laid out what the job looks like month by month, and we'll provide training for that ambassador so that they understand the role and the expectations. They'll also have access to a CRM system to track their engagements and the work that they're doing. For any of the communities on the line today that are working with Digital Main Street, will look very familiar because we've actually using Digital Main Street CRM as the back end for all of this. So they'll even in communities that have been part of Digital Main Street, those ambassadors will, already have a bit of a leg up on, businesses to engage in those communities as well. So we will fully resource them from a job description and expectations perspective, as well as, the training and learning throughout the program. We have this vision of how the program is going to work right now, but we all know once you get on the ground, things change, and we learn lots of cool and interesting things that'll make it better. And that's a key part of the Main Street Ambassador Network. Is ultimately, we'll probably do weekly or bi-weekly masterminds where all of the ambassadors can share what's going on in their neighborhoods, and share best practices and share what's not working, and ultimately support each other through this process.
Great, thank you so much. And Jared, another question. Can the project include the cost of hiring an events manager?
So staff costs or labor, yeah, those costs are can be included as eligible expenses.
Great, thank you so much. And another question that we have, and this is, just bear with me while I just read through this question. Okay, so I think you've sort of already answered this question, but is partial funding allocated, or is it sort of an all or nothing kind of funding?
For the Activator program?
Pardon me, yes, for the Activator program.
Right. Yeah. So we'll be judging applications in their entirety, and not kind of selecting pieces that we want to fund. So it'll be a yes, no, go, no go piece to that.
Great. Thank you so much. And we didn't have that question come through, Chris, for the Accelerator side, but maybe worth answering as well.
Yeah, ultimately, the funding available is $50,000 towards the hiring of that Main Street ambassador. That is expected to be a full-time position, so there may need to be a need at the local level to provide a bit of a staff salary top-up. Then in addition to that $50,000, there's $7,500 that'll be made available for local program delivery costs. So that will be specifically, whether that be hardware or travel or local marketing. And then there'll be the $10,000 grants, so $100,000 in total that will be provided for grants in that local community. And again, all of that's provided to each of those neighborhoods, in addition to the other soft support of market research and collaboration.
Thank you so much. And a question for both. Can this program funding be stacked with another government funding program?
100%.
Yep. You betcha.
Great.
And again, I think we encourage that. And of course, as you look at the neighborhoods you want to focus on, ultimately knowing that there's planning policies or economic development policies that align with what you're trying to do is a good thing, right? And of course, applying for both streams, the ambassador and the activator, the accelerator and the activator streams, in those specific neighborhoods, I think, again, shows how we're trying to realize as much impact in those neighborhoods, in addition to, other economic development policies and programs that you might already have for those areas. And, I know lots of small business centers and CFDCs, they have like Starter Company and others and Summer Company, thinking about how you could bring those into to that specific neighborhood as well, and really, again, amplify the amount of support and impact ultimately that might be along that main street or those main streets that you want to identify.
Thank you. And another question that I think is relevant to both. How do you suggest sort of organizations within a community work together to apply, or should they apply separately, and how does that work?
Good question. I think there's a broad, as we discussed in the presentation, there's a somewhat long list of eligible organizations that can apply for the Community Activator Fund. Of course, if your community organization is not incorporated, if it's outside of those bounds, you're going to want to work, of course, with an organization that fits within that criteria. And we leave that to you in terms of how you define that. Of course, in that case, it would be the eligible organization that would, of course, apply. We do encourage one application per project, though, and so not multiple coming in from multiple different organizations.
Yeah, and then for our application process, ultimately, we're looking for whoever makes sense from that local community. If it's not the municipality leading the application, we'll just want to make sure that the municipality has that letter of support. But we encourage collaboration at the local level. We want to see how the municipality, if there's a BIA and the Small Business Enterprise Center or the CFDC, how they all are part of this discussion ultimately, because again, it's all about impact, and impact requires collaboration and people working in the same direction together.
Great, thank you so much. And just, sorry, Chris, I know you just answered this in the chat, but I'd like to sort of bring it up. About the ambassador, is that required to be a full-time role, and for how long?
Yeah, so that's required to be a full-time position, and it's funding for 12 months for that position. So we see this as a 12-month program. I know, we all know who do community economic development work that 12 months is a short time. We of course pitched this to be a 3-year program. Unfortunately, it was more taken as a pilot. That said, hopefully we'll show impact in those first number of months, and maybe we can grow the funding to expand those timelines. But yeah, this is a full-time position. As far as what the rate of pay is, we leave that to you at your local, whatever your local pay grades might be. But we'll provide $50,000 towards that staffing position. And again, we'll give you a job description and an idea of the skill set that you should be looking for, but very focused on, again, that kind of small business consultant skill set. I do see a few questions here, Kelsey. I'm just going to jump in though, just around the idea of an ambassador and how, can it focus on multiple downtowns? So it is an example in a rural area, in a county as an example. We kind of see the idea of an ambassador kind of focusing on between 100 and 200 businesses. So of course we want to be focusing on a specific geographic area, and not across a municipality. That said, if we're in a county situation where there's a number of small downtowns throughout the county. So I take my, I'm from Stratford, and I, look at Perth County around there. Could you have an ambassador that focuses in on Mitchell and Milverton and Shakespeare and Sebringville? All those businesses together, maybe 100 or a bit over 100. Yes, 100%. You could take that approach and have one ambassador. It's still 10 grants that have to be shared among those communities. But yeah, so we can work in that kind of a context and look at that within your community. So more than happy to explore that and understand what that best ratio might be in your community.
Well, that's great, Chris. Thank you so much, both of you, for your time. We're gonna have to wrap it up here just because we're almost at 3 o'clock. Thank you so much to everybody who came and participated and for all of your wonderful questions. We are committed to answering all of the questions. So if we didn't answer it live now, we will get back to you and answer that question, no problem. As well, please visit our website and sign up for our newsletter. That way you'll sort of be up to date on all the things My Main Street. And yeah, thank you again so much for taking the time today, and we will get back to you with all the answers to your questions soon. So just stay up to date on our website. And thank you so much for attending. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Jared.
No, thank you, Kelsey, for keeping us straight here.
Thanks, Kelsey.
No problem. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Let's do some cool work across Ontario together.